Chapter 283 to 285. Rei stood in the throne room of the moon castle he privatized from the recently deceased Toneri, admiring the architecture while his clones were trying to research the two devices they stole from the castle during the fight. The device to start the moon crumbling was not really complicated, to be honest. All it did was make use of the pent-up Kaguya's chakra residue and pushed it into the weak crevices under the planet's surface. Sure, it was an ingenious use of a dumb concept to cause mass destruction, and really, that's what Rei thought being a ninja should have been about. Nobody knew about it, yet it could have been used to wipe out an entire planet. Any idiot could use it too. From a scientific point of view, when Rei looked at it from the perspective of what the scientists of the elemental nations knew right now, it was a very simple device. In any other situation, Rei wouldn't be interested in it at all, but when he found a peculiar set of seals drawn in a hidden compartment, Rei found out many surprising things. Apparently, Hamura Otsutsuki did regret sealing his mother on the moon. After all, why else would he build a device that would let him talk to her in her seal? What he previously thought was some kind of weapon was just a primitive walkie-talkie that used Kaguya's residue chakra to connect to her in the seal. The use of her chakra for the moon-destructing jutsu was added only later. What really made Rei a bit sad, however, was the fact Hamura never actually used the device for its real purpose after building it. He must have realized what potential it had, Rei mused. Quite the sight, this building. Conan suddenly appeared behind him, causing him to turn towards her. "Only you?" Rei asked, a bit surprised. "Yes. Tsunade is playing with the Tensegan device. Did you know it is made of a massive number of Byakugan eyes? Kinda gross, but apparently, it would have been quite a good Christmas present for a medic ninja." Conan amusedly hummed. Well, Tsunade did want to play with Byakugan eyes for a long time now, yet she had no opportunity so far. Rei shrugged. "Pakura is entertaining herself with the puppets, preparing them for transport and stuff." Conan continued. "Already? She is quite impatient about that." Rei tinkered with the seal on the device while reacting. "Well, she really likes her new assistant Shunriku, and these puppets are the best gift she could ever imagine giving to that woman." Conan said, "Plus, you know her. She is always so serious about developing her village," she wistfully said. Conan might not show it, but she was quite jealous of Pakura. Pakura might not see herself as Sunakunoichi anymore, but she did see Sunagakure as her home. Conan missed that feeling. She knew her home should probably be the land of rain, but she simply could not see it in the light Pakura saw Sunagakure. Conan found Pakura's sense of belonging quite enviable. As for Ringo, she found the armory, so I don't think we will be seeing her anytime soon. Conan chuckled, causing Rei to grin too. And Mei decided to explore the castle. "Which leaves the two of us." Rei nodded, painting new seals on the walkie-talkie device with his chakra alone. "You're not going to explore? I thought that was why you made sure it wasn't you who stayed behind in our base." There were only 6 of them on the moon, and Yuriko was the poor lass who drew the short stick and had to guard their base. Needless to say, all 5 of Rei's women cheated in their own way in that particular draw. Not that Yuriko would ever know. "I already do," Conan spoke. "I just don't see the point of doing it myself. My paper clones are enough when it comes to looking through useless trinkets. I'd much rather spend my time with you." She sat down behind him and put her hands around his neck, quietly observing him work while enjoying their closeness. "Somebody got to make sure you don't do something crazily life-threatening." Rei would never admit it, but hearing her say that, his smile widened a bit. This was how it always was, and he was fine with it. "Whatever would I do without you?" He snorted. "You would probably blow yourself up in your first week dabbling with seals." She offhandedly replied without any real heat behind her words. "I did blow myself up in my first week dabbling with seals," Rei quipped. "See what I mean? You are incorrigible." Conan said, and Ray could feel her gently kiss the back of his neck. They were together long enough to know what the other thought most of the time, and Conan was sure Ray needed a bit of her support right about now. "Am I that transparent?" Ray sighed, enjoying how Conan tightened her hug. "You saw yourself in the kid?" she asked. "Well, to be honest, I could have ended that way too if I didn't meet you." Ray acknowledged. Toneri was strong, not as much as we are, and he was indeed touched a bit in his head, but he was also in a league of his own. This fight, it really made me think about why exactly I am trying so hard to create a better place out of elemental nations. Why did I even make my own village? In the end, I just want a safe haven for us. He shook his head. That's what we always did. Watch out for ourselves. Conan put her chin on Ray's shoulder. "Are you sure contacting this Kaguya is a good idea?" she worriedly asked. "Maybe we just could let her stay sealed inside of the moon and forget about her?" Conan didn't like Ray's decision of meeting up with this apparent goddess. First, she didn't believe in gods, and second, from what Ray told her about the woman, she was, like Toneri, a bit touched in her head. Unlike the kid, though, Kaguya was a lot stronger, which Conan thought would mean a lot tougher to negotiate with. Conan also had no idea what kind of seal was used to seal Kaguya, and if it would be dangerous for Ray to pay her a visit with his consciousness. For her, it was simply far too dangerous to even attempt it. But Ray was already decided, and she knew there was no moving him once he got going. She could only slightly redirect him and make sure he made no foolish mistakes. Ray sighed. "We could make sure she never gets out. But I do want to talk to her. I am prepared for arrogance and haughtiness, but I would like to believe 1,000 years in a seal would mellow her down a bit. She could be really useful," he said as he finished a final stroke of a seal. "And just like that, your communication device is done." Conan muttered, more to herself. "Well then, guard my body, will you?" Ray exclaimed, taking in a deep breath to give himself a bit of a push of courage. He made sure to add many safeguarding seals on the device so his being would not be endangered, but one simply never knew about these kinds of things. Then again, with how much effort he put into it, he would at worst get injured. Just like that, Ray's body slumped in Conan's embrace, his consciousness venturing deep into the sealing space in the moon where the Mad Rabbit goddess supposedly resided. Ray connected to the plane of the seal, and the very first thing he saw was nothing. This obviously surprised him. So, Hagoromo was not even courteous enough to actually craft a seal space in here? Ray grimaced, imagining how it would feel to be sealed in a black space of nothingness for well over 1,000 years. Needless to say, he didn't like such a picture at all. This doesn't give me much hope for an intelligent conversation with Kaguya, to be honest. Ray sighed. Every seal master who ever studied how to seal entities somewhere knew that crafting a seal space where they would reside was a necessity. It was the very first thing these people learned, and for a good reason too. Nobody wanted to seal a bijou or something of equivalent might only for the entity to go mad in the seal, becoming even more dangerous than before. Even those that hated bijou wouldn't dare to do this. Ray really worried about Kaguya's mental state right about now. Then again, he had hope. She was supposed to be the closest thing to a deity his planet ever saw, so just maybe? The pocket dimension of the seal was immense, and for that, Ray was grateful. Using the moon as the medium for sealing was clearly beneficial in this regard. Thanks to that, Ray wasn't faced with Kaguya upon entering his consciousness into the seal, and had time to prepare. The first thing he did, what any self-respecting and non-suicidal seal master would do, was naturally check the state of the seal. Surprisingly, the seal was holding up quite well despite its advanced age. Seals, in general, were created to last, but keeping something as powerful as Kaguya under a lock for 1,000 years, that was a feat on its own, considering the average period of time. A seal designed to keep a bijou inside a jinchuriki was around a century before it started to deteriorate. Rei quickly discovered why the seal was still working perfectly, though. Simply put, Hagoromo disregarded literally everything but durability when it came to the seal. It was obvious he created it on the fly, and from what Rei could spot as he let his senses drift through the nothingness of the pocket dimension, it had a lot of rough edges. The entire structure was held together not by the ingenuity of the creator, but by the sheer power of his chakra. The only ingenious part was where the seal separated Kaguya's chakra from her, so she couldn't pit her own chakra against the Hagoromo's in the seal, instantly breaking it. Rei couldn't in good conscience give Hagoromo much credit for that, though. Anyone with at least one brain cell would do that, knowing Kaguya could just brute force her way out otherwise. That made Rei's mood rise a bit. A good seal master would be able to escape such a seal. It would take time and effort to find an appropriate way, but it was definitely possible. Well, that gives me an upper hand in the talks with Kaguya, I guess. Since she is still imprisoned, she probably doesn't have any knowledge about sealing. That's good. Rei nodded to himself in a pondering manner. It was then Rei looked at the section where Kaguya's chakra was siphoned and reused to keep the seal going. What he found made him grimace. So she is affected by the chakra fruit, Rei bitterly realized as he watched globs of a black substance being separated from Kaguya's gathered chakra before it was used to power up the seal. That might be a problem. These globs didn't really exist in Kaguya's chakra. They were just a representation, an image the seal created to portray that Kaguya's chakra was corrupted. Rei reckoned it would be impossible to identify if they were not inside of the seal. The only reason why it was now possible was that the seal needed pure, uncorrupted chakra to power itself up, so it automatically separated what it didn't need. Rei observed the mechanism behind the process, and after a few minutes, he decided that he definitely had to use this part to his advantage. Pulling the chakra from within himself, he started feeding it into the seal, knowing it would alert its resident. Rei was not deterred, however. He simply continued tinkering with the seal even after he felt a new pair of eyes intently stare at the back of his head. Kaguya's presence was unmistakable. The second it engulfed Rei, he could feel her power despite it being sealed. The logical part of Rei knew he had nothing to fear from the woman as she was powerless inside the seal. The primal part, the part governing his nature sensing, however, screamed at him to get away fast. Standing near her was like being washed over by a tsunami during a hurricane. It was then Rei understood what Kaguya really meant when she said that all chakra belongs to her. She was a planetary level of monstrosity. The Biju, artificial or the real ones, simply felt like underdeveloped children compared to her. The only saving grace was that, judging by the way Kaguya let her presence freely flow outside of her body without any restraint, she really had no idea how to control it. Rei couldn't help but quietly chuckle. To him, it seemed the woman staring at him didn't even have a clue about her own power. It was so ridiculous, it became hilarious. Then again, if she actually learned to control all that energy within herself? Rei subconsciously gulped, still ceaselessly focusing on altering the chakra purification mechanism in the seal. That brought a new dilemma for him. Should I tell her and teach her about her potential? Or should I simply let her waste it? Rei really felt conflicted about that. Guess it depends on how this will go. Finishing with his job, the pocket dimension of the seal somewhat brightened as if some kind of previously unseen taint was reduced. Rei turned towards Kaguya, who was furrowing her eyebrows at him, showing him a weird expression as she tried to comprehend why she felt different than a second ago and what exactly changed. Quite cute. Rei revealed a small smirk as the regal-looking woman in front of him looked around like a little confused girl while slightly scrunching her nose. He cleared his throat getting Kaguya out of her momentary reverie and causing a slight blush to paint her bone-white cheeks before her face again attained that aloof and cold regal look engineered to put a sense of inferiority in those who gazed upon it. Nevertheless, Ray still found the situation quite funny, so the smirk on his face stayed. They stood opposite to each other, measuring the other with their gaze in total silence, while the atmosphere around them was growing progressively more awkward. Ray always knew he would meet this woman somewhere along the line, but now that he stood in front of her, he really had nothing to say to her. Jumping at her with his offer seemed a bit too abrupt, too, so. As for Kaguya, her situation was even more difficult. After a while, Kaguya slowly opened her mouth in preparation for speaking, but before she could let out a sound, she silently closed it with a disgruntled expression, throwing a ponderingly inquisitive look at Ray, who watched her internal turmoil with interest. He really didn't expect their first meeting would go like this. Screaming, arguing, trying to kill each other while he tried to persuade her of the cleverness of his proposal. Yeah, kinda? But he would never expect having her adorably stare at him in speechlessness. Finally, Kaguya decided to cut the chase and spoke in a somewhat unsure manner while tilting her head. Would you believe you are my first guest since I was thrown here?" Ray really had no idea how to answer that. "I must say, I never expected this meeting to go this way." Ray smilingly mused as he drank tea and watched Kaguya munching on various types of food with gusto and the enthusiasm of a little child who just received her favorite dessert. Much to Ray's surprise, after their initial awkwardness passed, the very first thing Kaguya asked him for was a bit of his chakra. This made Ray wary, but also extremely curious. She was not asking for an amount that would allow her to do anything substantial. In the end, Ray gave her what she asked for, and then watched in amazement as Kaguya materialized a feast through her creation of all things. Around the ankle-high table full of various foods that could be classified as female's wet dream were various fluffy pillows for seating, and Kaguya promptly flopped down onto one of them before starting to enjoy the food, impatiently inviting Ray to join her with her indifferent eyes containing a deeply hidden eagerness. He wasn't even properly seated when Kaguya foregone all manners and started enjoying herself. Ray had to admit, this was a totally new style of cooking. "I didn't have anything to eat for 1,000 years, Kaguya managed to say, before taking another spoonful of pudding into her mouth and repressing a blissful moan. The corners of Ray's lips curled upward, whereas his right eyebrow rose at the childish woman. He expected a regal, cold, and dismissive princess that would demand the world out of him if he wanted anything in return, but what he got was this. As if sensing his doubts, Kaguya gulped down the pudding and spoke again. "The thing you did with the seal. I have no idea what it was, but it worked. It was sudden, but I felt as if something was lifted from my consciousness and no longer felt like attacking you on sight, so good for you?" She hummed while her eyes distractedly trailed towards another plate full of sweets. So the influence on her psyche was more subconscious. Ray took into account her wording. She didn't experience any sudden flip that would shake her entire being when he purified the taint. Instead, she simply felt as if her emotions and outlook somehow slightly shifted. Then again, Ray scanned the modified seal with his mind. The chakra fruit became a part of her the second she ate it. It's not like the taint was removed from her. I just added a feature that negates its effects as long as Kaguya is inside of her seal on the moon. That naturally meant the second she is released, her outlook would shift back to her previous state. Clearly, Ray needed more time to ponder about these problems. Ray gently smiled at the woman. "You are quite the pervert, aren't you?" he said, observing with satisfaction as Kaguya momentarily froze before huffing and continuing to eat as a slightly pink hue formed on her cheeks. Since they sat down, Kaguya didn't look in Rei's direction once, focusing her eyes on the food, but she had Byakugan eyes, and Rei was a trained ninja. Naturally, he didn't miss her gaze. "Well, you will have to excuse my curiosity, but you are the first person I see after a long time," Kaguya grumpily muttered and, for the most part, retracted her Byakugan gaze from Rei as silence ensued between them. What Rei found cute, however, was that now her eyes actually flickered towards him every so often. It was only a few peaceful moments later when Kaguya spoke again, this time with a measured and serious tone. "What exactly do you want from me? I doubt anybody would enter this seal without any agenda, so what's yours?" It was obvious she mistrusted Rei's intentions. Sure, they were cordial right now, but Rei reckoned that was mostly because there was no way to harm each other inside of the seal. Kaguya might have portrayed a childish and excitable front with how she acted. She might even seem easily manipulatable, but Rei knew better. The woman in front of him wasn't a naive fool. That's why he was glad this seal was a perfect neutral ground for both of them. Rei nodded, not seeing any reason to tiptoe around it. "I came to propose a deal," he started. "I can free you from the seal." He said that part slowly on purpose, observing Kaguya. Her eyes indeed showed a slight sign of brightening at his words, but the woman didn't let her hope shine into her expression. Instead, she had her perfectly indifferent mask donned as she waited for Rei to continue. "But as you probably already realized, I won't do that just out of the goodness of my heart." Kaguya slowly nodded. "What are your terms?" she bluntly asked. And this was the part where Rei's demeanor completely shifted, much to Kaguya's bewilderment. He released a deep sigh and sheepishly chuckled. "I don't have any?" he said, completely aware of how ridiculous that sounded. Rei saw how Kaguya's face became blank after hearing him, and instantly decided to continue to clear any misunderstanding that might or might not form between them. After all, he wouldn't want her to think he is trying to deceive her. "Right now? I don't have any right now. I honestly don't even have a method to free you," he shrugged, ignoring how Kaguya's lips twitched in exasperation, before the woman decided to stuff a piece of a dessert into her mouth lest she said something unflattering to Rei. They stared at each other for a moment, Rei awkwardly and Kaguya coldly. When Kaguya didn't have anything to say, Rei decided to elaborate. "I am the best sea master in elemental nations." Rei noted how Kaguya's attention shifted away from the food and back towards him when she heard these words. "If anybody can devise a way to get you safely out of the seal, it is me. As for the terms, I really don't know what to ask for, but I can tell you right now, I will not free you for free. There will definitely be a price. I just don't really have anything you could provide that I would need or want. Except completely fucking up the plot and making the biggest villain of Narutoverse my ally." Rei inwardly thought. There were many advantages to freeing her, even if he did it completely for free. Most of them were indirect, but that didn't mean there would be no benefit for Rei. But Rei also knew that doing that would be extremely suspicious, and while Kaguya would have been grateful beyond words, she would also be wary of his intentions to no end. She was a former ruler, and her political mindset shone clearly through during their talks. She understood mutual benefit, whereas having a stranger show her such a massive kindness was instantly a reason for concern and a start of some nefarious plot. Then again, Rei would not release her from her seal unless he was absolutely sure the woman posed no danger to him or his family. Kaguya felt stumped. She was happy that somebody decided to help her because these 1,000 years of utter powerlessness took their toll on her mind. But she also understood the underlying message in Rei's words. He would only help her if it benefited him, and she had no idea what she could offer him for such a service. With a slight embarrassment, she realized her thoughts must have been visible on her face when Rei smiled at her and spoke. "For now, let's not talk about it. Making a counter seal to this, Ray gestured around himself. Will be a long job anyway. Let's just get to know each other and talk some more about the past, shall we? I am really interested in why you ended up here.